so one of my friends told me, well, don't you know, Donna, that the California Indians suffered more than any other group of Native people in the United States? And he then told me in the 1930s, there was a bounty for Indian ears, and it was $30. And I thought, that can't possibly be true. That was in the year 2000. I was invited to go to a conference. I've been working at a Native American clinic for 14 years in Oroville, Feather River Tribal Health. Anyway, so I was invited to go to a conference by one of the psychologists from that clinic. And this psychologist is from Arizona, and she's Native, and she's pretty stoic, very bright, very heavy duty, doesn't show much emotion. And she invited me to go to a conference with her, probably in about 2002. And when she was going to get up to speak, I thought, God, I hope she kind of tells some stories or livens it up a little bit, because she's so, she's like someone who talks about facts and details and stuff like that. And I thought, that's not going to get to the people. And she got up and eventually told how kids were used as bear bait in California. And it still really bothers me. So anyway, I got up to talk, and I couldn't speak. That had been the worst story I had heard up until that point. And so what happened to me as a non-Native person is I gradually heard these bad stories over time, over many, many years. And it got to the point where I believe everything. I never doubt a single word. I read Elias's book. I have no doubt whatsoever that all of these things have happened. But that happened over time for me. These stories are really kind of horrific, and they're hard to believe, and it's just, so one thing I'm saying as a part of the dominant society is that most of us in the dominant society haven't really heard these stories. And there's another story that I'd like to share, and it has to do with a man who I knew very well, and he was an Ojibwe gypsy up in Michigan. When he was little, twice the missionaries came to his teepee. He was being raised traditionally in a teepee, wearing loincloths, hunting, fishing, the whole 9 yards. He's about 59 right now. They came twice, and the first time his parents hid him, in leaves in the side of the teepee, and the second time they got him and took him to the missionary school. And he escaped. Ken escaped. He was about 8 years old. And he had to walk through the cold snow of Michigan without any shoes, and he walked quite a long way. He finally passed out and got covered up with snow. Meanwhile, he had gotten pretty close to the hunting camp of his family, and there was a wolverine that went past his camp and was circling around the hunting camp, and the hunters kind of saw it and wondered what was going on, and they followed it. And this wolverine went off a little ways, and then it started going around and around this little lump in the snow, and then it went off, and so the people dug it up, and it was Ken. Let's see. So anyway, I'm trying to remember why I'm telling you the story of Ken. Oh, I remember now. The reason I'm telling you this story is because later on, years later, I always thought that was an amazing story. He went off and actually was able to be with his grandfather for the rest of his growing up years, but unfortunately, he's a heroin addict, and he did not, he's basically not quite survived his mission school days. But the reason I tell you this story is years later, I was actually in a group, and I was in a group run by a friend of mine, and the group was to learn how to tell a good story. And so I thought, well, I'll tell Ken's story. I love his story. I think it's really profound and beautiful. And so there was a group of 6 people, and the group leader, who was a friend of mine, and so I sat there and I told his story. I told it quite a bit better than I told you guys. And after I finished, no one said a word. so I sat there and I kind of waited, and I thought, boy, didn't they hear this story? This is an amazing story, you know, and nobody said a word at all, not even the group leader, who was a friend of mine, nothing. And then I thought, oh, well, thank you, Creator. Now I know how it feels to tell a story that no one believes. And you don't feel like doing it very often, that's for sure. One point I would like to make is that while a lot of you all know about historical trauma and know your stories of the missions, most non-Native people have no clue whatsoever as to what historical trauma is. They have no idea whatsoever that the past, the traumas of the past are still affecting your people and causing these huge rates of domestic violence, suicide, homicide, substance abuse, lateral oppression. They don't understand, you know. So let me just say that for those of you who do understand this, part of the healing is for you to educate people, And some people, you know, I've given a number of talks to non-Native people in California after I came back from the Navajo Rest, and a lot of people are receptive, so I just want to put that out there for you. So what I wanted to really talk about is how do we heal the soul wound? And I have a number of other stories to tell you about that. In the community where I used to live on the Navajo Reservation, Kayenta, Arizona, I now do telepsychiatry with them. And last year, in 2014, we had at least 4 homicides in our community, and there's about 4,000 or 5,000 people living in this little community. It's not very big. We have 1 grocery store, a couple of restaurants, a couple of hotels. And anyway, I think the 4th homicide was of this 18-year-old girl who was very brutally molested, and not molested, raped and murdered by her the man she babysat for, and then he ran over a few times. And her mom, well, she had been a patient of mine for a while, years ago. She was 18. Her name is Jamie Nix. And I believe it's important to call to mind those who've gone ahead for the purposes of healing. So Jamie Nix and her mom is Lisa Charlie, and Lisa has worked at the clinic in Kayenta, at the medical clinic, for about 20 years. And eventually I asked somebody to have Lisa come talk to me, and so she did. So we started this process of kind of talking about what happened to her daughter. And when I lived on the Navajo Reservation from 97 to 2000, I was in the community a lot, and I did a lot of talks on historical trauma. But when I started working there again in 2011 from a distance with this telepsychiatry, I didn't do any talks on historical trauma. And but after Lisa's daughter died, I thought, you know, we got to start it up again. This community is really sick. They're really suffering. So we talked, Lisa and I, and we decided to do something called the Sacred Dream Project. And part of that was to have a meeting with the community. So I went out there last September, and we called a community meeting for whoever might be interested, and about 30 people came, and we spent the evening, you know, talking about historical trauma and how it affects the community, that kind of thing. At the end of the night, we were there for about a couple hours. At the end of the night, this woman stood up, and she said that her son had been murdered, shot to death on her doorstep like a few weeks before that. And she said, I have been feeling to blame for that because the door wasn't unlocked. You know, maybe I could have been up to greet him at 5 in the morning when he came home from work. Maybe the door, you know, maybe there was something I could have done to prevent my son's death. And she said, I've been isolating myself and just feeling really, really bad. And I thought I would feel like that forever. So this lady had come to this meeting, and she stood up and said that, and then she said, and you guys, now I realize you are my sisters, and you are my brothers, and I'm not alone, and you know, you're with me, and I think I can go on in life. So the reason I tell that story, obviously, that is healing. That is super duper healing. That's community healing. That's people getting together and telling their stories. It didn't cost any money. wasn't much planning involved. You know, people got together, talked about these things, and someone got really, really healed. Lisa, the one whose daughter got murdered, has been asked to participate in July in the Navajo Nation Domestic Violence Annual Conference, and she's really excited about it. She wants to go. She wants to tell her story. So what I'd also like to talk about is a little bit about Val's tribe. We have been doing these, well, he's been doing wellness meetings for a long time, but I joined him a while back, and I think it was about the third meeting. We always kind of talk about, you know, what should we talk about, and so I said like 2 sentences. We started out the meeting, I said 2 sentences on something, and immediately an elder man, the oldest man there, kind of said he wanted to talk, and up he got, and he told his story from growing up and some of the pain and stuff he had gone through, and he cried a little bit, and he says, I've never told these stories before. And he finished, and then the next oldest man told his story and said, you know, I swore like 20 or 30 years ago I would never talk about this. And so he finished talking. And then the most amazing thing happened then. 4 young guys in their 20s or 30s started telling their stories. None of the women, we were all just sitting there. It was amazing. But so that kind of process happened. And then one of the, Valentine and I have been working, you know, for a number of years trying to figure out how to heal the soul wound. And one of the things we did was to go visit a Buddhist monk that I had been following for quite a few years, and his name is Anam Thupten. So we went to visit the Buddhist monk, and basically what he said was, you know, when we asked, how do you heal the soul wound? And he said, you embrace your pain and suffering. And that's it. He says there's like, when you get hurt really badly, there's like this cemetery inside of you, this dark, scary cemetery. And the way to heal is to actually go down and look at it and see what's there. What people tend to do is drink or do drugs or do whatever, or not talk about their feelings or not tell their stories. But what the Buddhist monk said was that's what he suggested. And so at one point, I told this monk about the story of this wellness group and how these elder men had spoke up and stuff. And I said, is this what you mean by embracing your pain and suffering? And the Buddhist monk said, how timely and relevant. We are all dancing to the same music. So I'd like to also mention that not only do the Native people who suffered, you know, at the missions, not only do you guys, and not only do the people who went to boarding school and went on the long walk and had all these horrible things happen, you're not the only ones that have the soul wound. The Catholic Church has a really, really big soul wound. And I have been a practicing Catholic all my life until about 2 months ago, at which point I decided I can't take this on, because at the time I believed that if Sarah becomes a saint, that the soul wound for the Native people will continue for about another couple hundred years. I don't know that I believe that anymore, and I'll come back to that, but the Catholic Church has a really, really deep soul wound, and the only way for them to get through and to heal themselves is to start looking at the cover-up. I mean, it's really clear. When you read some of these books, it's super clear that since the 80s, the Catholic Church has been, well, in the book that our panelists mentioned by Rupert Costo and his wife, it very clearly says they asked people in Southern California to come forward and tell their stories of what happened in the missions, and some priest said, if you do that, you will be sanctioned. And I asked a lot of people, what does that mean? You know, none of us even knew what that meant. But what we kind of think it means is that that's on the road to excommunication. And I have to say that it's, you know, I'm sorry, I've always supported the Catholic Church and I've defended it with my family for 59 years and I'm not doing it anymore. So that's just one thing. But the other thing, Val is giving me signals that I'm kind of ignoring. The other thing I wanted to say, it's really important, it's really important, is that I no longer think that it's going to be 200 more years of suffering. I am so heartened by the work that people have been doing. Val and I used to wander around together thinking, God, are we the only ones who are interested in talking to the Pope and getting information in the missions? We kind of thought we were just doing it by ourselves and didn't know anybody else who was doing that until recently. And now we know all kinds of people who are interested in getting information into the missions and to having, the truth be told. I would like to, one of those people who's been working really, really hard is a lady named Toy Purina Karat. That's her name that she goes by. MoveOn.com petition. She's got over 6,000 signatures against Sainting Sarah. If you want to do something useful, go online, move on, and sign it. But I just wanted to say that there's so much healing going on now in this room today, the last 4 months. It's going to continue well past our lifetimes. I think things are going really well, actually. So that's it, Val.
Thank you very much, Don. The issue of the historic trauma, it affects all of us. It definitely affects all of us. And it's basically a 12-step program. The first step is admitting there's a problem and recognizing it. And for us, we need to recognize it. We do suffer from historic trauma. It takes on a lot of different forms. It can be alcoholism, drug addiction, violence, depression. It's all of those things. And one of the classes we have, I'll talk about just one thing, that we had is how to find a mate. I mean, so many of our tribal people, they get involved with the wrong person. You can tell from the very first date, this guy or this person is not right for that person or this guy, And we're just trying to get our people to open their eyes more and understand how important their relationship is, and to get themselves healthy, because to have a healthy relationship, it takes two healthy people. It does look good to have yourself healthy and marry somebody or be involved with somebody that's unhealthy, because that person will just bring you down. And so many relationships are built on that unhealthiness or believing you're going to rescue or fix that person, and that just doesn't work. I'll stop there. Thank you. Our next and final speaker is Mr. Greg Cotton. He's a Christian research scientist and human rights advocate, and it's my pleasure to welcome Greg Cotton.
Thank you for that. If I had my way, I would argue that any of you would be better suited to be up here than me. But I'm not in charge, so here I am. And I'm deeply honored and moved by this opportunity.
All right, let's get him.
Yes, right. And so my name is Greg Cotton, and as what some of you have maybe already guessed, I come from a working class lineage from Germany, Ukraine, Poland, and England. My love and passion for the ocean and the environment has led me to a degree in marine biology. I'm a research scientist, and I do research across the state and from Hawaii to the Arctic. I was raised in the suburbs of Detroit, and I was raised Catholic. I went through the traditional sacraments, including confirmation, where I took the name Francis, after St. Francis of Assisi, the patron saint of the animals. Yes, the same, and it's my new burden, the same one that Junipero Serra apparently admired. This fact alone has been very challenging for me to reconcile the history that I was taught in public education and from the church itself versus what really happened. I am deeply concerned about the identity that I've created for myself, and I'm deeply concerned about the cultural identity that we've created based on false information. Over my lifetime, and certainly over the last decade or so, I've had the extraordinary privilege and honor of hearing the Indigenous perspective. I've had the privilege and honor of participating in Indigenous and a few Indigenous traditional ceremonies. As an environmental scientist and a spiritual man, the Indigenous wisdom, songs, and perspective on the natural world will be a critical part to the healing of human beings' relationship and our culture's relationship with Mother Earth. Ironically, this process has solidified my strength and understanding of Christ. Ironically, the Christ that I'm speaking of is the same one that the Catholic Church taught me about. And I'm also grateful for this teaching as well. It's actually the very reason why I stand here today and sit in this seat in opposition to the insult and denial of this situation. As a boy, I would go downtown Detroit with my family, and we would go to the Catholic soup kitchens to support those in need. To me, this was the heart of Christ. To me, Christ was not a man who hoped and prayed that those in need or those that are suffering would get help. He stood, he absolutely stood for them. And when it wasn't popular to do it, or when no one else would. I'm grateful for this role model in my life. Strangely, as I'm actively confronting this issue, I feel more Christian than perhaps I've ever been in my entire life. It's so bizarre. For me, the message of Christ is clear. And the Catholic Church is this construct of man around a great man. This situation is a mistake, and the church is making a mistake, and we are making a mistake in the history that we're telling ourselves. Not here today, but out there, you know. Christ would not want this, and he would not sit by and watch this happen either. The action that the Catholic Church is considering taking is not Christian. It may be Catholic, but it is not Christian. I know this may sound contradictory, but I assert that it's the case. If the church wishes to remain, the church is simply playing a political card at the expense of humanity. If the church wants to remain relevant in modern information age, it will need to think quicker than it has been, because this history is no longer constrained by media organizations and censored. It has been said many times already, our history books do not teach the truth. Therefore, people are only taught, or only know what we are taught, and that which we seek ourselves. We live in a land where up and down the 101 there are bells glorifying a radical evangelical path. In the Bay Area, there's a massive statue of Junipero Serra. Of course, our public schools, and certainly Catholic schools, don't teach the whole history. Given all of that, it makes perfect sense that the Vatican would look at us and think we aren't paying attention. The church is not confessing its sins, and they are sins. Further, they're hiding it in a shroud of sainthood. And this, for me, is the highest concern. Me and a solidarity team has contacted the church at several levels, and most of them are telling the same story and giving the same excuses. You can hear the denial in their responses. Not because there isn't compassion available and possible, but because it's so intense. This history and these facts and this information is so intense and so upsetting on so many levels that it's difficult to reconcile. But history will repeat itself if we tolerate ignorance and denial at this level. The church is throwing history and indigenous people under the bus for a political media stunt to increase their popularity. Christ would not sit by and watch this happen. Christ would probably not be a fan of saints, if you ask me in general. But the one thing I know in my heart is that he would not sit by idle and condone this selfish and damaging behavior. I am not here to judge, but there is no honor in what the church is doing, and they are lying. And the top leadership of the church knows it. That being said, the only reason that they're trying to get away with this is our public education has failed. I feel strongly that this issue is as much about Catholic politics as it is about our public education. The Catholic Church is moving in this way because our public education has created the space for it. As international leaders, they have a responsibility to see this and to not make this sort of clearly offensive mistake. We need to fix our history books now. One of the hardest and yet most rewarding parts of this process for me has been to walk in the darkness, stand in a place of love for humanity, standing in truth and light, walking up to Catholic leaders, priests, and parishioners, and engaging powerfully and without censorship around this issue. Many of them are so invested in their institution that they are unable to detach themselves from the idyllic notions of the church, and therefore do not have the strength or the ability to acknowledge the horror that the church has caused. These people do not wish harm, but the gap is simply too big for many of them to bridge. Now, you should know that there are many, a surprising number inside the church who are very clear and educated about this topic. And they think this is horrible what the church is doing, but they just don't know what to do about it. I think that if they can forgive themselves for their affiliation for the church, and to forgive the church, and then to talk to them about it, this would go a long way. Humans don't want to be closed off to each other. We don't like to have enemies, and we don't like to resist truth. I find that if we can find a way to come together in love, forgiveness, and strength, the most extraordinary relationships can happen, and the most extraordinary healing can happen. Unfortunately, most, if not all of you, know this path and know that results do not happen overnight. My mother is a dedicated Catholic. She goes to Mass every day. It's a critical part to her health, her community, and her relationship with God, her Creator. She sees the Catholic Church makes terrible mistakes and is deeply frustrated by it. She also recognizes that this is one of those many poor choices that the Vatican has made over time, and she could not be more proud of my participation here. And the fact that I'm standing in solidarity with our Indigenous neighbors, creating a future founded on truth, understanding, and compassion. Why is the church doing this? It is with a very heavy heart to say it's strictly political. The Catholic Church operates inside a very strategic global plan. I feel that it occurs to the church that the collateral damage caused by this is less than the benefit, then it will move forward. The only reason this is possible is because our public education has grossly failed. It has grossly failed the Indigenous community from the Pacific to the Atlantic. As a member of this country, it deeply saddens me, and I deeply apologize for this profound failure. It's not hard to figure out why we don't teach the truth. It's horrible. Unfortunately, brothers and sisters, as a result, I'm afraid we've created a horrible reality which denies your experience, the burden of which I cannot imagine, but I can feel and do see. The tragedy isn't just over there either. With our Indigenous neighbors, this perpetuated failure creates a wall in our culture. From honoring your brilliant, historic, and modern perspective, the more I get to know the Indigenous community, the more a fire burns in me and the light and the greatness that you are. The greatness that many don't see because the truth of history is so painful and so upsetting that the human mind can just shut down. It is past time to bridge and heal this wound. There are so many great things we can create together if the church could just take responsibility for its atrocities. It all sinks in when I travel north of California to the Pacific Northwest, and the Indigenous art, culture, and wisdom is celebrated and colorful and can be seen all over the place. As it was mentioned earlier today in the earlier panel, it's suppressed here. And for horrible reasons. I pray and work hard for this to change. The brilliance of your ancestors and community is the key to bringing balance back to this land. The Catholic Church is obviously square in the middle of this horrible situation. I don't find my Christian upbringing to be in conflict here. To my surprise, and I imagine yours, it's the opposite. The message of Christ is simple. Do unto others as you would want them to do to you. Love thy neighbor as thyself. And stand for what is right in your heart. As I told a compassionate priest a couple weeks ago, before me and a dozen of us protested for 3 hours in front of his church, my Christian beliefs require me to stand here in opposition to this. My Christian beliefs require me to speak up when wrong is being done to one another. They require me to support my neighbor and to confront oppressive behavior. The Catholic Church has its issues and it has its benefits too. But if there's one thing it's taught me, it is to follow my heart and let love and compassion be my strength and my medicine. Do not walk by those who don't fit in and aren't understood. Do not pass by the opportunity to appreciate another. and do not enter the city as a tyrant or an oppressor. The canonization of Junipero Serra is the exact opposite of these teachings. For those of you out there who have been or are Christian or Catholic and feel that this is wrong in your heart, it is right for you to stand up in opposition to this. It is right for you to voice your opinion. Your voice and your heart are a gift from God or the Creator, not the church. The Catholic Church intends to be an access to the divine. It's not the divine itself. What's in your heart is. For me, that is what's most important. That is where I try to stand. You are amazing. Thank you for being you. You are our future, and you know this. If you want, I'm here to help. Thank you.
Very eloquent and definitely from the heart. Great. We thank you for those words. They mean a lot. And they're very direct and very firm. And there again, a lot of truth. So thank you for that. That concludes the presentation part of the panel. Do we have time for questions? A few questions? Yes? Let's do it as we did this morning, please. We'll have the microphone set up on that far side there. And if we get in line to ask the questions, we'll go until I'm given the signal that there's no additional questions, until we're out of time. And we'll go ahead and get started. State your name first, please.
Hi, Greg. I'm Sharice. I'm here with my husband. As a mother of Native children, I have a lot of concerns about how to go forward. That's what I'd like to talk about. Everything here has been wonderful as far as information. Bless you guys all for it. How do we go forward from here? Obviously, in my mind, the Congregation for the Causes of Saints and the Defender of the Faith fell down on the information on Serra. Why is this canonization going forward? The Vatican fell down on it. I'm sorry, Mr. Lopez, I think the Pope knows. When I see Al Jazeera and every major Catholic newspaper, including National Catholic Reporter, reporting both sides on this, the Pope knows. I hope you go. I think you should go. And I think you should present it, including what happened to the papal bulls of Plymouth Day, which forbade the enslavement of Native people, which was promulgated after Intercatarite, and which was promulgated before Serra was even born. Okay. But I'd like to know also if we're going to have formal protest to the Vatican as well as to our elected governmental officials as the Pope puts his foot on native land. And we get the native organizations like National Congress of American Indians, whoever, involved in creating this protest, not only physically in Philadelphia and Washington, but also before the movie comes these next 3 months to show dismay as inhabitants of North America for what's happening. This Pope is being canonized in the name of Latinos. He's going to be the first North American Latino saint. Okay. And he's being canonized for are the Franciscans still here in the name of the Franciscans? Please help us. So what can we do? That's my question, and I'll shut up now.
Okay, thank you for the question. Yes, you can.
Hi, thank you very much for that question, and you hit the nail on the head, and so did you, right? That the issue is political. It's political. And unfortunately, the Latino, Chicano, Hispanic community needs to be vocal and respond to this because the church, the Catholic Church, if you're not aware, is losing members in Mexico and all across Latin America in large numbers. When I say large numbers, I mean thousands of people are are leaving the Catholic Church in countries that have been traditionally Catholic. And so much of this is politically driven to try to bring back some of that membership and dedication from Latin American countries to the Catholic Church. And so those of us who fit that description need to be vocal about that and air that in the public. Instead of dancing around it, like which is sometimes done, we need to be blunt about it and really talk about that and make sure that people understand that there are many people within the Catholic Church and outside of the Catholic Church who see that. It is not invisible. And we need to talk about it and call it out for what it is and hold the church accountable for that. Thank you.
Can I answer part of that too?
Yes.
In talking to many friends, Indian friends up in Washington State and in Arizona and New Mexico and back in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Indian people who are Catholic have no clue about Junipero Serra and about who Junipero Serra is in relationship to California Indian people. So the word needs to get out to those Native people up there and out there, because we are isolated or insulated in thinking that everybody knows about Father Junipero Serra. Everybody does not, and ignorance is bliss. So the more news that you can get out there to the general Indian population via whatever media possible, it would be the best bet. Educate our own people.
We need to do that. Thank you very much. We're going to take turns on the microphone. We'll go to the microphone next.
I first wanted to thank all of you for your comments. They're really, really insightful. And as a practicing Catholic, this is a really difficult subject for me, as all of you have talked about. I'm going to go to church tomorrow, and it's going to be real. I'm going to be going with a really conflicted heart. So I really appreciate all of the insight that all of you have brought here today. I did want to just offer a slightly different perspective on the role of education, though, because as someone who's been in education for all of my adult life, and I've served on our local education board, I'm not sure that I would always agree that education has failed us. I think in many ways we have failed education, because we've seen lots of situations. We've seen the situation in Arizona, for example, with the educators who were trying to bring truth and historical accuracy into the classrooms, and it was elected officials who kept them from doing that and removed it. Here in our own community, when I was on the board, it was elected board members who took books off the reading list. It was not educators. And so I think in many ways, education is really constricted. The textbooks that get published are controlled by public opinion. The school boards are elected by public opinion. And until we can change public opinion, many times educators are not allowed to teach the truth. I know of one teacher who was specifically told she would not be allowed, she would not be hired back if she continued to teach white privilege. So I think sometimes the schools get blamed for things that really are much larger societal problem. And while I definitely agree that not all educators are enlightened on the subject, and many of them have perpetuated a lot of problems as well, some of them are really constrained and are trying to do good work and really don't have the opportunity to.
Thank you for that comment. Would anyone like to speak to it? Great.
I just wanted to clarify briefly that in case that was misunderstood, first of all, deeply respect educators and teachers. It is really a lovely calling, and thank you, all of you. And when I was speaking to education, I do mean at a very core level, and I'm fascinated by your insight about this, because there is the public opinion dictates the education, and how do we interrupt that? But what I meant to speak up to earlier was that it is at like the source, you know. I actually had an experience in high school when one of my teachers was like, you should go check out the Native American story because it's more to be known there, you know. But literally, he had to do that. So I appreciate your the very, I couldn't even, a very difficult situation. Thank you.
One thing that happened in California, and it's in Liz's book, is that when Mariano Payeres said we need to come up with an alibi, he came up with a very good alibi. The churches were loving places. The Indians came in voluntarily, etc. And so whenever the school system was set up, I really believe that they went to the Catholic Church to get the religion of what happened at the missions. And so that, you know, that's why the missions and the Catholic schools are so in sync, because they just got their history from the history that the missions were being told. Yes.
Yeah, I'd also like to respond to that. I work at a California community college. I've worked there for over 20 years. I'm a staunch advocate for education, particularly higher education. And I say this with all sincerity. Your point is very well taken. It is not the educators in the classrooms overwhelmingly that are blocking this, making it happen. It is also political, and that is the administration and the legislators in the state of California, the decision makers. But when we say education, that's who we're talking about, not the teachers in the classroom. And the other thing that you need to know is everybody right now can take an action, because there is an assembly bill in the state of California calling for mandatory ethnic studies as was implemented in Los Angeles. That is the key, where we can have approved curriculum that teaches the real history, not just of Native Americans, but of all people of color, and be able to break down some of these untruths and just misinformation. That's not going to happen without legislative action. And although that's not the only solution, this diverse panel creator has brought these people here for a reason, because each one of us has a key to a different piece of the puzzle that is the solution. And that is just one piece, and I'd be happy to provide that information to everyone here to go back to your area and write a letter to your legislators demanding that legislation now.
Thank you. Do we have a sign-in sheet with people's emails of those that are here today that would like to be on that list? Okay, we have that. Yeah. So that's the kind of information we can share. We can use that to share the information. Next question.
Yes, thank you. By identification, my name is Joe J.J. Acevedo. I am a proud member of the Yaqui Nation and the Purepecha Nation from the mountains of Michoacan. My ancestors have been politicized, and that was really good to hear, finally, after all the comments and all the talks and all the speakers, finally able to hear the one word that I've been waiting to hear until now, the last speaker, politics. As a young man or a young kid starting my education in the Los Angeles Unified School District, I didn't speak a word of English. I only spoke my native tongue at home. So when I started school in the Los Angeles Unified School District in 1946, there were no bilingual programs there. There was no education to help me with mine. Hey, Donna, I'm glad to see you peeking out up there. But anyway, in learning English, I came home and my mother, my Yaqui mother, told me the best way to learn English is to get the dictionary and start going through the dictionary and learn English as I am hearing it in first grade. So I did that. being a good son and a good student, I started learning about the root words of all the words I was hearing in school. And when I got to politics, I learned that poly, the first part of that, poly means maybe. Many cities, many things. And ticks are blood-sucking parasites. So when I learned that in my later years, when I joined the military, became a Marine for 4 years, I'm a proud member of 3 different veterans organizations: Disabled American Vets, Veterans for Peace, and the Native American Veterans Association. And everything to do with veterans is political. Everything to do with my Native people, my Native ancestry, is political. We are all members of tribes. We all come from tribes. You, as a descendant from the Slav, what are those countries you mentioned? All of them Eastern Europe, the Caucasus, the Caucasians were tribal people, Germanic tribes, the African tribes, and all the tribes that were over here, and the tribes that were on England who sent those invaders over here so many years ago. So I'm really heartened to hear the fact that politics has finally entered into this conversation, along with education. And so educating our politicians should be our first and foremost primary focus, and I want to thank the panel. If any of you want to talk about how you're being politically active, I would appreciate hearing that, because we're all connected in this political fight that started out with Manifest Destiny and came out of politicians in Washington, D.C.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you very much. Yes,
I was thinking I wasn't being politically active, but then I realized that I went to my son's graduation in Ohio on Monday of this week, and Michelle Obama was there, and I took Elias Castillo's book with me, and I took copies of letters that Valentin Lopez and I have written over the years, and I kept asking people, how can I get this to her, and everyone kept saying, you can't. And then I went to the wait in line for the little Skidoo can, and I stood behind this man who actually knows the Obamas and knows people who know the Obamas, and so he's got the book and the letters and said he will deliver them. I told him it's an emergency.
how do you advocate? Next question.
It's not really a question. It's just, I just wanted to get the statement to you. My name is, my name is Christopher Caraiz. I'm Chumash, and Maya. I go to 4th grade classes. I do the 4th grade curriculum. I go up and down the South Bay, all the way from the San Fernando Valley, all the way to San Bernardino, into San Gabriel, and all around the South Bay, Carson, Torrance area. I do about maybe 19 schools a year. I do about 19 schools a year. A couple times I get to do Catholic schools every once in a while. Usually I get invited once, and that's about it. It's hard, especially with the Serra stuff going on now. In the last 4 months, I've written over 200 letters to dioceses up and down our area. I've gotten 2 responses, only 2 out of about 200 letters I've written. One was from Sarah's parish out here in Camarillo. He was one. He won't meet with me. He won't talk with me unless I meet with him, basically. to his Holy Father, to all the different radio stations and newspapers in Vatican City. I received one response from them to clarify what I'm asking of. But my thing is, it's really disheartening to hear nothing. To hear nothing. We meet with, I've been meeting with a group of people, we've been meeting with Bishop Eckhart, with the Catholic Archdiocese, trying to come up with some dialogue on this issue. And even there, my faith is shaken. I'm a non-practicing Catholic. And so what I want to say, I want to thank you, because it is hard. It's hard when you're at 3 o'clock in the morning and you get nothing. And you write 200 letters and you get nothing. When you write letter after letter after letter to these people who are supposed to be those who are leading you, who are supposed to be the example, and you get nothing in return. And many times I just stopped. For a couple of weeks I just stopped. Said, forget it, screw it all. It's not worth it. But then I come here, and I see the panel, and I listen. And it gives me a little bit of energy to write the letter to this one out and in fact to respond to, because I didn't put it off. I don't want it. I'm just tired. And it gets tired in your mind and your heart. You just give me that little bit of strength I need to continue to go to the 4th grade classes, because I don't want to go anymore. I don't. But the letters to Michael to say stop selling the projects. The letters to Joanne, stop selling the projects. You know? The letters to all these people and you get nothing. You know, because it is political. And I do. Often I want to give up. And I wanted to give up. And I looked forward to this weekend. I looked forward to being around people who understood what I was doing, who themselves are doing the same thing. And I look at our leaders, you know. You guys are what I hope to be one day. To not maybe sit on a panel, but to be seen and respected like I respect you and see you. To know that I fought. And I just wanted to thank all of you guys, Marcus, everybody that's here, because you guys are here for a reason. And I'm here for the same reason. And when we leave today, we take this with us, and I take this, what you've given me today, take that, so that I can continue my part of the fight, like you guys are continuing your part of it. And it is a fight that's going to be never ending, because there's just too many children out there, and I think it starts with them too, to teach them that you shouldn't make a mission. It's our Auschwitz. Those are our kilns that were burning Jewish people. Well, the missions are ours. Those are our Auschwitz. And I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you, Minister.
Just real quick. In 1987, when Sarah was being beatified, Chris and a friend of mine, we were at the Northgate powwow, and we said, come on, let's go up to Carmel. And so we did, and when we went there, Red Son and his group were already there. And so we went and we prayed. We also went into the church, and they started yelling at us, get out of here with your pagan rites. And it was very, very traumatic.